Hi, I'm Dr. Sam Hazeldine and welcome to another episode of the Well Doctor series. Today I'm speaking with Dr. Lauren Bosley. Lauren is a PGY1 doctor who began to experience burnout in medical school like many people. However, unlike a lot of people, she managed to course correct quite quickly and bring some really effective practices into her work as a doctor. So today I'm excited to talk about well-being for doctors that actually works in practice. So welcome, Lauren. It's great to have you here.
Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Me too. I'm looking forward to this conversation because, throughout the course of the Well Doctor series, I've spoken with a lot of doctors and a lot of medical students, and everyone is highlighting how important it is to create well-being practices in medical school. Medical school's tough, but being a doctor's tougher. So It's really important that we use medical school as a training ground to learn how to practice well-being so that when we get to become a doctor, we're equipped to deal with the challenges of the work. So today, Lauren's going to share with the listener, a really important mindset shift that she made that allowed her to do this and to effectively create some behaviors in medical school, which she was then able to transition into being a healthy, happy doctor. So should we get into it, Lauren?
Absolutely.
Excellent. So, okay, today what we're going to cover off is how Lauren ended up in medical school because it is relevant to the conversation. We're going to talk about the key insight as to why she saw that she was going into burnout. We're going to talk about the critical mindset shift that she made, which I think is really important, really interesting. And we're going to talk about the 3 steps that Lauren took to address burnout effectively and to create behaviors that supported her. And then we're going to talk about how she had to adapt when she became a doctor, because we know that being a doctor is significantly different from being a medical student. So let's start, Lauren, with how you ended up in medical school and some of the challenges that you went through on your way to get there.
Okay, so for me, I was one of the very few people. I always wanted to be a doctor, like genuinely before I can remember. There's videos of me at 2 years old holding a stethoscope. At 4 years old, I was telling people I wanted to be a doctor, but I don't have doctors in my family. So as I got closer to finishing high school, the idea of becoming a doctor seemed terrifying and unrealistic with, the barriers you have to get through to get into a medical school. And in year 12, I had a lot of pressure on myself, both from the school and I guess kind of internal. And that translated to me doubting whether I could be a doctor. And I always remember a conversation had between myself and a teacher. And the teacher said, if you're stressed now, how do you think you'll go in medical school? And for whatever reason, that made me think, oh, well, I don't want to go to medical school. I don't want to be like this, which shouldn't necessarily be the same thing, you have to be stressed in medical school. But I didn't apply for medical school when I finished year 12. I studied nursing for a year. I did very well in nursing. And I remember an amazing lecturer that I'm still in touch with to this day. She pulled me into her office and I had no idea why. I was terrified. And she said, you've got the top mark. You've beat the other 20 pre-medical science students. Why are you not in medicine? And I kind of told her, and she said, I think you should be in medicine. Give it another thought. And so I applied and I was successful. And the following year, I went to medical school at 18.
Great story. And I mean, highlights just the importance, because once we become doctors, it's a teaching environment, and it really does highlight the importance of words that you when you're in that position as a teacher, the influence it can have, both negatively, obviously, and positively, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
So you got into medical school, and then you started to see some changes, obviously in yourself, but also in others as well. You acknowledged that you were going into burnout. And so what was the key insight as to why you saw yourself going into a state of burnout?
Yeah, so I guess for me, I think the goalpost kept shifting in medical school because initially, I wanted to finish year 12 and get a good mark. And then I wanted to get into medical school. And then obviously you want to pass medical school. But then I was getting good marks in my first year and just settling in. But by second year, since I got good marks first year, I wanted to keep up the good marks. And, I wanted to get all distinctions, and then I wanted to get high distinctions, and then I wanted to top the exams. And the goals were becoming more and more unrealistic to a sense because, the top mark doesn't depend on my ability. It depends on everyone else's ability, who else is getting what marks. And that external locus of control isn't the healthiest thing to focus on. So
Mm.
I guess that's where it started stemming from internally. Externally, we were in COVID when I first got burnt out. So my social situation changed. My friends weren't around. University wasn't in person. So all those conversations that I'd initially underappreciated, in the lecture theatre or walking between classes, they were gone. And I don't know, then when I had more time with myself, I guess my coping strategy was to just study all the time. I'll just distract myself. And that's when it started spiraling for me
Mm.
and identifying it. To be completely honest, I think my family identified it before I did. They just kind of
You're right.
said, you seem different, you seem really stressed. Is how you're
Yeah.
behaving sustainable? And honestly, to begin with, I was in denial. I was like, this is
Mm.
fine, this is medical school. And then when I started realizing like physically I couldn't sustain it and, mentally I wasn't happy, that's was the wake up call for me.
Mm. So you started, and this happens with a lot of medical students, and I speak with, a lot of you, and a lot of them. I know you're not anymore, and people who get into medical school, they're top of their class at high school. They're duxers, they're, whatever. You get into medical school and now you're average. And so as you identified this external locus of control, what your classmates are getting is irrelevant to your journey as a doctor, isn't it? So
Absolutely.
there's an external locus of control, but then ultimately that burnout comes from the pressure that you put on yourself to perform in an environment where you start to, as you say, shift the goalposts, and you're used to being top of the class. Being top of the class in medical school, it's not actually necessary to be a doctor, A, and B, it's also a lot harder, isn't it?
Definitely. It's just not sustainable, not healthy. I think one of the shifting things for me was the mindset. Am I trying to be a good student on a piece of paper, or
Yep.
am I here to be a doctor, like a
Yep.
good doctor that is good with patients? And that was one of the things I had to keep coming back to and remember that, if I get 5% higher on an exam, that isn't going to make me a good doctor. But what is going to make me a good doctor if I have sustainable work-life balance.
So what was it that made you make that critical mindset shift from grades to being a good doctor? Or did you, was it something that you were told or saw or acknowledged in yourself?
The above, I think that's a really good point. I think it's a hard thing to come to terms with when you've been thinking a certain way, like you said in school.
Yeah.
We're all high achieving and, that's what we've been thinking up until then. And it was all those different ways, like it had to come from myself, but, I had to see it for myself. I had to hear it from other people and then just really focus on that. And it is a conscious change in focus, when you're used to thinking one way. But I think it's important to come back to because, medical school is 6 years for me. I couldn't have for 6 years only focused on grades and neglected the patient skills because I think
No.
there's patient skills that make a good doctor that will never be able to be graded.
Absolutely. I think, I believe that, life is about gear changes. You've got to know when to shift gears. And
Yeah.
the thing is, getting into medical school is about grades. Like, it's not about being a good doctor. And I
Yeah.
know that the competition now to get into medical school is you've got to be getting high 90s. I mean, it's incredibly difficult. And so once you're in, I think it's really important for medical students to remember you're in. You're smart enough. You're there because you should be there. And the medical school wants to keep you there. The medical school isn't trying to fail medical students. Like it's almost impossible to fail medical school. So, like making that shift from, okay, I'm in medical school now. It's, grades are useful, but they're not the main thing. They're a reflection on, am I becoming a good doctor? And interestingly, when we were speaking and preparing for this, you made sort of a couple of mindset shifts, wasn't there? One was that, from it's all about the grades to it's about being a doctor. But the second one was, and it's about being more than a doctor, wasn't it? Like that identity.
Yeah, absolutely. I think so many of us, when you're teenager to early 20s, you're forming your identity. And up until medical school, my identity was I'm book smart. I'm a medical student. And I kind of came to terms with at a similar time that that's not healthy. Like I'm more than a medical student and I need to be more than a medical student because, it's not sustainable and the better doctors have an identity outside of being a doctor.
Absolutely. And I sort of liken it to the metaphor of of like a stool. If you've got a stool with only one leg, if there's a wobble with that leg, that stool becomes unstable. If you've got three
Yeah.
legs, or whatever, however many, if you've got more to your identity than being a doctor, there's going to be times when your career is not going well. You're going to miss out
Mm.
on, training programs, or you're going to lose a patient, or consultant's going to treat you badly. Well, there's going to be times. It is what it is. And if your whole identity is tied up in that, and that's feeling wobbly, then the whole thing feels wobbly. Whereas if you've got these other identities, and it might be as a family member, or as a sports person, or as a musician, whatever, could be your faith. If you've got these other ones, then when that career leg gets a bit wobbly, as it will at times, the whole stool doesn't lose its,
Such a great metaphor. And like what you were saying, our careers by nature, they're going to have awful days that other people just can't even imagine. And
Mhm.
I think the things you're talking about that keep the balance, you don't just do them when you have a bad day. I feel like they're things that you need to be doing when you're having good days, or when
Mm.
you're in medical school, so that when you have a bad day, it's already there for you to fall back on.
And I think a hugely important part about being a doctor is how we connect with our patients, and
Mm.
we don't connect with our patients as a doctor. We
Yeah,
connect as a fellow parent, or a surfer, or whatever. Doesn't matter. But those other areas are what make us human.
absolutely. And I think that's what we can't lose as doctors, the human element. Medical school and our workplaces will innately take up so much of our time and emotional capacity. So we need to make time for ourselves.
Absolutely. So let's talk. I mean, I think those things are really important. You acknowledge this external locus of control. You acknowledge it was the pressure you're putting on yourself, and then you shifted that mindset to be, how can I be a great doctor, and how can I be more than a doctor? And when we prepared, you said three like simple yet really powerful steps that you took to address burnout and to create behaviors that would support you into the future. Let's talk. Can you share with us those three steps that you took?
Yeah, absolutely. The first was acknowledging there was a problem. And to me, that was honestly the hardest. I think I'm a bit of a stubborn person, and, I didn't want to feel weak, but it comes to a point where you've got to just acknowledge that, your behaviors aren't sustainable. And
Mm-hmm.
like what we've been talking about, we need identity. So it was a long process. It wasn't like one day I woke up and decided I wanted work-life balance. It was
Mm,
a lot of internal reflection and discussions with friends and family. But,
mm,
I did decide that I want more out of life. So acknowledging that how I was acting. Um,
mm.
the
It-
second
So
part
just, so
was,
just before you go on to
yeah,
that, I think I just share with you a really relevant story about, because I think it is so hard to see it in ourselves. I'd been a wee while ago, I'd been studying burnout and well-being in doctors for like over a decade. I'd successfully lobbied the World Medical Association to amend the modern day Hippocratic Oath, the Declaration of Geneva, to include the health and well-being of doctors. Like, I was in the space. And I was with my then wife, the mother of my children, Claire, and we were up with the kids up the gondola in Queenstown, and she took a photo of me, and I was like, "Why'd you take a photo?" She's like, "Well, you look like shit," and I was like, "Oh, okay." She's like, "Look, you put so much into your work, you put so much into your kids, but you're really putting nothing into yourself. Like, you are a shell of who you used to be." And after that, I decided to go and do. I was like, and this is, bear in mind, I'm an expert in burnout, and I just like, oh well, I'll just do. And I've been getting tireder and less interested, and it's just the work, as we all do as doctors. I was like, I'll do the Maslow burnout inventory, and I was like at the high end of the chart. So I think it's useful to know that even someone who knows a lot about burnout can still miss it in themselves. And so I think you're so right. That first step, acknowledging the problem, and burnout looks like so many different things, doesn't it? It can be lack of interest. It can be lack of caring. It can be you stopping your, what were the other things that you saw in you that were you like, actually, this isn't normal. But we do normalize it.
it was so powerful what you shared, because that is similar to how I felt. And I always remember a lifestyle doctor hopping online in a course and saying for him, burnout is just less. I'm less happy. I'm less
Mm,
emotional. I'm less engaged, less passionate. And that is how I felt, a shell of my person. I wasn't sleeping as well. I
mm,
wasn't excited to see my friends. I was just kind of putting one foot in front of the other to go through
mm.
life. And it's really funny what you said about the photos, because I did the same before my final medical school exams, took a photo and I knew I looked tired and exhausted, but I thought, oh, I'm going to laugh at this one day. And I do
Yeah.
now, but at the time I wasn't feeling great.
Yeah. I mean, the thing, I think there's a couple, the thing about it is you've got to acknowledge it is actually a problem because
Mm.
we normalize it. 2 in 3 doctors are in burnout. So less, I think it's a great way to describe it. Most of us are less and less, but we normalize it because it's just, that's what it's like being a doctor. The thing is, it doesn't have to be, as you shared. So you acknowledge there's a problem and then you moved on to what was the next step?
I was just going to add quickly, if it's
Oh, yeah.
okay, when you were talking about doctors glamorizing it, I think it's really important that we advocate for that culture to change, because I
Yep.
lived on campus the first 2 years of my degree and everyone's kind of seeing who can get more burnt out, who's done the less sleep, and, oh, I'm burnt out. Oh, me too. Like, I don't think it's healthy. And these days when my friend says I'm burnt out, I sit down and say, are you okay? What are you doing about it?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think we need to acknowledge that whilst burnout can be contributed to things around us, it's ultimately us that changes the course of it. So
We have
yeah,
to.
and thank you for all your work with the advocacy, because, doctors' health is one of those things that we're so focused on helping others that we forget to help ourselves.
No, thanks for sharing that. And the word I used was normalize. And it's
Mm.
interesting that you use the word glamorize because I haven't heard it, I mean, I have sort of heard it in those sort of terms, but not that specific term. It's like, it's a
Yeah.
medal. It's like, yeah.
Yeah. And at
And
the
it's not
time,
helpful.
like the time I fell into burnout, I was thinking it was normal, like what you were saying.
Mm,
And, it was like a medal at the college. Oh, who's most burnt out? Who looks the
mm,
worst? And I just look back and think, we needed to be the opposite. Who's managing to sleep during their exams? Who's
mm,
managing to keep
mm.
life balanced during these stressful periods? Because,
Yeah,
like you
yeah.
said at the start, it's never going to end as a doctor, to be
Yeah, yeah.
completely honest.
No, it's a great shift in our mindset. It's not the,
Mm.
I had 4 hours sleep. Wow. You see what I had? I had 2 hours sleep. It's like we should be like,
Yeah.
all right, that's not right, is it? Let's do something
Yeah.
about it. So what were the things step 2, what
Mm.
did you do? How did you move to addressing it and changing behaviors?
Honestly, for me, it started with the basics. It started
Mm-hmm.
with making sure I set an alarm to sleep 8 hours. And that sounds
Mm-hmm.
silly, but, when I was stressed and burnt out, I would sit up late and I would, then still get up early for the lectures. And
Mm-hmm.
the sleep I was having wasn't quality. When I would go to bed, I would have been staring at my laptop immediately
Mm,
before. So my brain wasn't switching off. So
mm,
I started doing guided meditations to go to sleep,
mm-hmm.
and it really helped me. I needed to do something to kind of change. This is work time. So this is me going to sleep.
Mm,
Um, Eating well, exercising. I didn't feel like going for a run, but I'd just do what I could do. Some days it was going to the gym, other days it was going for a walk, but just moving my
mm,
body made me feel a
mm-hmm.
lot better.
Yep. Yep. Brilliant. And I mean, those really are the basics, aren't they? Get your body
Mm.
moving, eat well, get some sleep. Was there more? You talked about sort of, hobbies and connection and things. Was that an area
Mm.
that you had to actively prioritize?
Friends and family definitely got me through those harder periods. It was a conscious effort because for me, when I was burnt out, I kind of retreat. I usually am quite a
Mm,
social person, but when I feel kind of empty in myself, I feel like I don't have the energy to engage. But I think
mm,
those are the times that I need to the most. And so
mm,
I started just texting people, hey, can we go for a walk together? Can we get a coffee? Calling
mm,
my family. All those little things reminded me who I was
mm,
and made me feel a
mm,
lot better.
mm. It's amazing, isn't it? And I mean,
Mm.
it truly isn't rocket science.
Mm.
But unless we start with saying there is a problem and then that problem, I'm not going to tolerate the problem. I'm going to actually start with the basics, exercise, food, sleep, hobbies, connection, like just do those things. And as you say, not apply the perfectionist to them. Like, not that I can go to the gym for an hour. I'll just go for a walk for 10 minutes or, I'm going to eat well 2 out of 3 meals today or whatever it is. Like we've got to be kind to ourselves when we actually apply those basics. Otherwise, what I've seen is you can contribute to the burnout by trying to apply perfection to everything.
Absolutely, because so many of us are perfectionistic in
Mm,
nature. And I think doing those things looks different for me at different stages of what's going on
mm-hmm.
around me. If I am on
Yep.
ward call, I just acknowledge that, oh, I'm not going to be eating as well if I haven't meal prepped ahead of time. Or,
Yep.
I will let myself eat lollies if I'm on a night shift because,
Yep.
I need the sugar.
Yeah. Right. Absolutely. So it's kind of taking the achiever out of us and just going,
Mm.
let's be average at them. Let's at least be average.
The big thing is just giving yourself grace, like we
Yeah.
are human. Like when we're
Yeah.
going through hard things, it's okay to not be perfect.
Yeah, 100% agrees. You created those behaviors around the basics. And what was the third thing that you did? What was the third step? Because when we talked about this, I found this really powerful.
Yeah, for me, it was gratitude because I'm a bit of a perfectionist and I like things to happen quickly. And coming out of burnout isn't a quick process. And I
No.
remember the first week of doing these right things and calling my mum and saying, I'm doing everything right. Why isn't it working? And I think
Mm-hmm.
you get to acknowledge it shifts slowly. But
Mm-hmm.
she's an angel. She posted me a gratitude journal. And every night she'd make me, well, not make me, but encourage me to write in it. And I still use it to this day. It's one of the best things I ever started doing because when I was burnt out, I was less happy. I was, just a bit ungrateful, I suppose, and just taking the time every day to acknowledge, like the start of the journal says, I will let go of, and I can acknowledge whatever's stressing me. And then there's a prompt and it's 5 things I'm grateful for. And it's just a nice opportunity. And you start with the basics. I'm grateful for clean sheets or a nice meal or seeing this friend today for a conversation. And things that I initially didn't appreciate enough, all of a sudden were in the front of my focus, and it allowed me to, be grateful and feel a lot better.
Well, I mean, I think we can't be anxious and fearful when we're grateful. And, gratitude brings us into the present, doesn't it? It brings us
Yeah.
here and what we are grateful for as opposed to what we don't have or want or blah, blah, blah out in the future or in the past.
Yeah.
But it brings us to the moment. I think what I loved about what you shared is, combined with the basics, it's practicing gratitude is like practicing grace to yourself, isn't it?
Absolutely. And just taking time to appreciate how privileged we are. I think we see a lot of things in our profession, or we were learning them in medical school at the time, that were
Mm,
heartbreaking and really
mm,
sad and quite distressing. And
mm,
it's easy to get caught up in those anxieties and
mm.
the negative feelings associated with seeing those things, which is fine, but taking time to acknowledge them, but then
Yep,
refocus on your life
yep.
is quite powerful. And I still try to make time to do it, to,
Mm.
remember who I am and how lucky we are.
Absolutely. And so tell me, how did it help? How did, acknowledging the problem, starting with the basics, being kind to yourself with those basics, and then practicing gratitude every day, what changed for you?
I found myself again, got the bubbly personality back. I think the biggest thing I took away from that first major episode of burnout is by identifying the early signs. Like for me, it is not wanting to see my friends or not sleeping as well, or
Mm-hmm.
starting to just slowly stay up later and later and I'm not getting
Mm-hmm.
8 hours sleep. And so these days I can start to implement all these things a lot earlier rather than waiting until I get burnt out to start doing things. I can just notice within myself, okay, I'm getting a bit stressed. I'm not prioritizing my well-being. And they're the times that I know even more I need to make an active effort. And I will start texting friends, hey, let's get a coffee. Let's go for a
Yep.
walk. Let's plan things that are purely for me. Get on top of it before it's even a problem.
I mean, there's a couple things there that really stand out for me. One is that, ability to course correct faster.
Mm,
And then the second one is that, doing these things, these important things, they're not always a quick fix.
mm,
So, it's not just about course correcting and doing it for a day. You've kind of got to, re-up on, doing things consistently, because the more consistent we are with these practices, the more immunized, or whatever you want to call it, we are to the stresses of the job, aren't we?
definitely. And, it is a conscious effort, especially at the start or especially when I'm stressed. But it's so important to do to prevent getting to the point where you're not
Yep.
feeling like yourself and you're feeling burnt out. And
Yep.
like what we were saying at the start, this is a lifelong profession. We're
Yep.
never going to not be stressed in some
Yep.
form. So,
Yep.
We've got to prioritize ourselves.
Yep, absolutely. And we're all, because we care, if you're in a
Yeah,
profession that you care about, we are all going to fall into the trap of over prioritizing some, things. And so that's why I think noticing that we're heading down that path and course correcting is so important, and being kind to ourselves, because it's just going to be, that's just the journey. Life is never like get the behaviors, get the habits, and you just flatline it the whole time. There's ups and there's downs, but the more we can smooth those out, with these sort of acknowledgements and with these practices, the better equipped we're going to be to handle what is a magnificent profession.
Absolutely. And it allows us to enjoy the journey because, what we do is a privilege. We see amazing things. And one thing I notice in myself, especially now where I'm with patients every day, when I'm starting to get a bit burnt out, I'm not as compassionate to my patients.
No.
I don't give them the same amount of time and presence. And it's like the saying, you can't pour from an empty cup. And to me, that's one of my main reasons now to keep prioritizing my own well-being because, our patients do deserve the best version of us.
Yeah.
And that will look different on different days. But, we can't neglect our own well-being because it is going to impact patient care at some point.
100%. I mean, it's well proven that compassion fatigue leads to increases in major medical errors. So if if you can't do it for yourself, do it for your patients.
Yeah. And for me, even though previously the burnout prevention was kind of at night, I think it's important to acknowledge even at work, we still need to show ourselves grace.
Yep.
Like if I have a hard case or a patient that has needed a lot of compassion, I will now go stand in the corridor and take 5 minutes. And another kind of form of instead of gratitude at work, which I do sometimes, I suppose, but a quicker version is box breathing, in for 4, hold for 4, out for 4. And it just kind of allows me to ground myself and feel, take a moment just to feel present.
Brilliant. And so, you began this journey in medical school in terms of identifying and doing these practices. How have you had to adapt that? Because, I do talk to, and I encourage every medical student, and I've said it on this talk, build the practices in med school because, they're going to set you up as a doctor. But then being a doctor is different. So how did you have to adapt these practices and things to being a doctor?
The most challenging part of internship for me was the hours. I did a 95-hour week at its worst. And, I logistically couldn't get 8 hours sleep between shifts. And working 95 hours, I couldn't get a coffee with a friend necessarily because I was working the entire week. It was kind of a week on, week off thing. So it was all about just working within the logistics and showing myself grace. That 95-hour week, I didn't get to the gym once, but that was okay because, I needed the sleep and I guess I was getting the steps up running around the ward. But then I guess making that extra effort on my days off to prioritize myself and check in with how I was feeling and knowing that I work these weird hours when I do have a weekend, I will really try to see a friend that's working business hours.
So being realistic, not being a perfectionist, but also showing yourself that grace, and I guess, and still holding yourself to a standard, isn't it? So that when you do have the time to do stuff, it's kind of that active rest, that active rejuvenation, so that you use that time to prepare yourself for what, will be challenging, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I guess the other stressful part for me this year, besides the hours being physically demanding, was, I guess, the things you see and experience, whether that's a consultant snapping because you don't know you don't know procedures, which you're not expected to know in medical school, logistical ways, how to refer, or whether it was we have had patient deaths. I have performed CPR this year. And on those days, the biggest thing that's helped me is debriefing. I will call a friend and de-identify what's happened, but I'll say, today I had to do this and I just want to talk about it. And, I feel better after I've been able to get it off my chest.
I was thinking about that in terms of being kind to ourselves, but part of that is showing that grace to other people too. As you say, when a consultant snaps or whatever, everyone's got their own stuff going on. Everyone in the hospital, they might have just come from a resus, So I think it's almost like not taking the job seriously, but not taking everything too seriously. So some consultant snaps at you. Try and let it go or whatever.
Absolutely. And I think that's why, going back to the whole point of this, shifting that identity in medical school, if all I was a doctor and a perfectionistic doctor, I would be crying if someone snapped at me. But if I cried every time someone snapped at me at work, I'd be crying at least once a week. By the nature, what you said, having a stressful job, people do get snappy. And the thing I've realized, the best thing is to just ignore it or take a deep breath.
Yeah. It's that internal versus external locus of control, isn't it?
Yeah, and just knowing, when you have your own identity and you're competent, it's if someone says, "Are you stupid?" you just laugh and walk away.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Look, I've loved this conversation. I think what's been great for me is hearing this stuff that many of these podcasts have touched on, but hearing it in practice and hearing how it's worked and how you've used these and built these behaviors so that you can A, course correct, but B, build, but these habits and behaviors that really help you as a person and as a doctor. So, Lauren, I'd always like to hand it over to the guests. What is the final thought that you'd like to leave people with, be they medical students or be they doctors? What would you like to leave people with?
I like quotes, and a quote that got me through my exam year of medical school was find magic in the mundane.
Mm.
And to me, it's all about being present and enjoying the journey because, like what we said earlier, the goalposts will always shift in medical school. It's about getting in and then getting good marks, and then we'll be doctors and we'll want to get on a specialty training, and then we'll want to get through those exams. Like, there will always be something to worry about in essence. But, it's some of my best memories have come from joking on a ward round or the people I have met along the way. So I just think it's important to be present and enjoy the journey, as cliche as that sounds, because at the end of the day, I've blinked and my early 20s are gone at a university. And instead of looking back and being like, oh, all I did was study, I've managed to along the way have some really great memories.
Yeah. Well, if you find the magic in the Monday, you do enjoy the journey, and as you get
Yeah.
on a bit, you realize the whole thing's a journey. There's
Yeah.
no final destination.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, Lauren, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed this conversation. As I said, I think it's been really valuable to hear so much of what we talk about, but in practice and how it actually works and how it's worked for you. Acknowledge that you were able to, at an early stage in your career, really see the challenge and also implement things that have been really useful for you. And I hope that, any listener has gained a lot from it and gained that optimism that you don't have to. Burnout is not something you have to live with as a doctor.
Mm.
It may be something that we all face at times, but it's not a place, it's not a destination either that we have to stay in.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for all your advocacy and speaking about it because, when I wasn't burnout, I felt helpless, and I kind of forgot that it was up to me to get myself out of it. And, in that first week when things didn't feel like they were shifting yet, I did feel like, is this even working? Everything feels useless. But, it's great that you share things like this and about prioritizing our well-being, because the other thing is it's no one size fits all. So I really hope that this helps people kind of find what works for them and take the time to prioritize themselves.
Yeah, you're so right on that. We all have to find our own formula for what works for us, be that sleep, diet, exercise, socializing, faith. We have to find what resonates. And I think what I've loved about these conversations on the Well Doctor series is, no one's telling you how to do it, but what we're doing is giving people perspectives. And so people can take from you or take from, so-and-so or whoever, and build their own little recipe for what works for them. But that is the key. We have to build our own recipes and then apply them.
Absolutely. And identifying you've got the problem and having that motivation to want to fix it, because it's easy to get stuck and feel like it's all not going to work. But, it's up to us to change burnout. So, yeah, thank you for speaking about it, because at the time, all I knew about burnout was everyone had it, and I just thought I had to live with it.
Yeah. Well, it's a great lesson that we don't have to live with it, just because
Yeah.
most people do have it. So the first part was right. The second part, it was a great course correction. Look, Lauren,
Yeah,
thank you. This has
absolutely.
been a really good conversation, and I'm sure anyone listening has got a lot of value from it. So thank you so much for sharing your experience, your perspective. And I think, showing the grace that people, that doctors, medical students would really benefit from.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you for all your advocacy in the wellbeing space.